Hare Krishna. So today I'm going to present some main point of one small book written by Dr. Singh, The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness. So I'm going to share the screen. So before starting that presentation, I dedicate that presentation to my different teachers that I had all in my life, especially in science and spirituality, and mainly to Srila Bhakti Saudana Maharaj, Dr. T.D. Singh, who is my spiritual master, and we get a PhD in 1974 in physical organic chemistry in California. And I also dedicate that presentation to Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder Acharya of Bhaktivedanta Institute, and he was the main teacher of Srila Bhakti Saudana Maharaj. So he wrote that small book, Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness, in 1973. And in that book, he asked a different question. What is the relation between science and religion? Can the religion survive in that age of science and technology? And what gives the Vedas in these topics? And he also answers some very important questions, like what is the nature of the universe? What is the nature of the human beings? He will discuss about evolution theory and two aspects, Darwin evolution or the Vedic evolution, and also the existence of a non-material reality, existence of God. And Dr. T.D. Singh, he called very often God the supreme scientist. So there are 8 chapters in that book. I'm going to present one by one. The first chapter, the Bewildered Spirit Soul, indicates that actually there are many scientists, especially geneticists, who explain that the destiny of man lies in their hands. And they proclaim that in the future we will make human beings according to demand and necessity. Of course, that book has been written in 1973, means many years ago, but many of these principles are still working. So many scientists are on the side thinking that if science is going to be more and more advancing, so we don't need God, except at a personal level, individual. So we can ask the question how we can perceive the existence of the supreme scientist of Krishna. Now we see that many modern scientists are very proud of automation, but there is a scientific brain behind automation also. Even Albert Einstein, he agreed that there is a perfect brain behind all the natural physical laws. When we think about brain, about operator, we are thinking about a person. And we see in the creation different examples, like the different planets, we see the sun is giving some heat, some light, the moon is also giving, the taste of the vegetables, cooling, and all of us, we are eating some vegetable like carrots, tomato, oranges, fruits, mango, So every of these items have different color, different aroma. But with modern science, we can, to some fruits or vegetable or grains, we can change the color. We can change the smell. We have the example of the corn, that it is, we have some corn we are genetically modified. Of course, we can ask the question, is it better? Is it good or bad for the human society? It depends on our value system. to answer that question. But we see that the main trouble with the materialist scientists is that they generally neglect the most important and fundamental aspect of their inquiries. For example, when Newton sees the falling of the apple, he didn't inquire who caused the falling of the apple. But he inquired how the apple has fallen down. So it is a very inquisitive matter. And it was really a genius to see the connection between falling in the apple and the law of gravitation. But who made the law of gravitation? Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of Calcutta Institute, explained that the apple did not fall when the apple was green, but when it was ripe. So this indicates that there is some cause which is more far away. So what is the cause of falling of the apple? So in Bhagavad Gita, is one of the very important books of the Vedic literature, Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, explain Sudeva Sarvamiti. Krishna is the cause of all causes. He said there is no truth superior to him. Everything rests upon him as pearls are strong on the thread. And he also explained in the same book, Bhagavad Gita, Rosham Rishu. I said, I am the ability of mind. Every one of us, we have some abilities, some facilities. But who gave that ability to discover law, like Newton, Einstein, or these big scientists? Actually, Bhagavad Gita explains it is Krishna who gave that facility, that ability to the people. So, in Goa, Dr. T.D. Singh explained what is the difficulty to accept at least an option that maybe God is existing. And he said that the greatest disease in the mind of the scientists is that they do not believe that something is a fact unless it is proved by scientific experiment. But we see that this is not true, because even in science, especially modern science, there are some things that we cannot prove by experience. For example, the imaginary number, which is the square root of -1. What is this? Can we reproduce that? The third law of thermodynamics. The Heisenberg affinity principle. Of course, here I'm just doing a very quick presentation, but if you read that book, you can have a lot of information about the detail of that. And another thing about the modern, the scientific theory, is they can change. And Dr. T.D. Singh explains the example of John Dalton, who was a mathematician. And in 1808, he made his atomic theory, explaining that the atom is the smallest items that cannot be divided. But we have seen in the beginning of the 20th century, it was not true. We can divide the atom. That's why we have proton, neutron, electron, who are part of the atom. So we can see that some scientific theories are changing. From the past to the present, they have been changed. So maybe it's a probability they can change in the future. Actually, we see that the modern theories, they can change. And we have seen also that we cannot experiment them. We have seen Darwin, it's also some type of speculation. Darwin is very famous because he discovered, or maybe rediscovered, maybe partial rediscovering of the evolution. And he worked a lot, that. It was a few years making observation in South America, After when he had been back to England, he took all his notes and he wanted to understand his observation. So he has expressed the theory of evolution. But at the same time, in 1857, he wrote to one of his friends, A.R. Wallace, was a naturalist. He said, Darwin, I am a firm believer that without speculation, there is no good and original observation. So this indicates that by writing his observation, making his presentation about his understanding of the theory of evolution, he was also speculating. So this is written in his autobiography. So it means if some person, discovered a theory and at the same time said, that theory, I also speculate. Are we going to believe him easily? Of course, no. And we see that Darwin, he has no knowledge about the nature of the spirit soul. He has no clear information about how the living entities is transmigrating from one species to another. He does not know about that. So now we are going to see about complete and perfect knowledge and evolution according to the Vedas. Actually, in the Vedic literature, there are many Veda means knowledge. And there are every type of knowledge is there and described in minute detail. And it is explained that in the Brahma Bhagavata Purana, and a book written more than 5,000 years ago, that there are 8,400,000 species of life who are transmigrating by the process of gradual evolution. And this is a transmigration we call reincarnation. Transmigration because the same person is the soul, the spirit soul, in different bodies. But in the modern universities or colleges, no one teach the science by which we answer the question, who am I? There are many universities, many places of learning in the world now, but there is no university about spiritual knowledge, about God. We can have some university connected to some religious aspect, Christian university, Muslim, Hindu, but when we speak about spirituality, means it is more universal. Spiritual doesn't change. Religion we can change. I can be member of one religion, and tomorrow I can become a member of another religion. The spirituality does not change according to the Veda. And Krishna explained in Bhagavad Gita that whatever state of being one remember when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. So this is the evolution according to the Vedic literature. It means it is evolution of consciousness. And according to our consciousness, we have such and such body. And we can see that actually it's a very important topic, because what Darwin has studied, it is we can say some type of evolution in the human species, or in the material species, we can say like that. But he did not know about why there is evolution, who is bringing the next body. And the Veda explains it is a consciousness. So it is why Dr. Singh go on by explaining that the Sastric injunction are the supreme judgment, and how one may accept authority from the Veda. Veda means knowledge, but everybody is saying something. Everybody is saying that he knows everything, But how can we know that the Veda are knowledge, are authority of knowledge? So how can we know with our father? So Papa explains the best thing is to ask to our mother. It seems very simple, but it is true. So in the same way, we need to ask persons who are having the real knowledge, persons who are not conditioned by our materialistic consciousness. And the Veda explained that there are 4 principal defects inherent in the conditioned soul, namely imperfect senses, propensity to cheat, surety of committing mistake, and surety of being illusion. So our person who is connected to these 4 principal defects, he can give a perfect knowledge. It's not possible. So it means that us, as normal living entity, we cannot get real knowledge. But if we study the Veda and the people who are not conditioned by the material tendency, we can get the supreme knowledge from these perfect books in the Veda. How can we know that Krishna is the supreme authority? Because very perfect people, personalities like Lord Brahma, like Narada, like Vyasadeva, we put the Vedas into writing. Vedas means like books like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, great personality like the Acharyas, the Maharajas, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarvati Thakur, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all these perfect personalities, they explain that Vedas are perfect. I was in that presentation adding one another slide. That Dr. T.D. Singh, it was, we were saying that in 1983, means 10 years after he wrote that small book, Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness. I had that slide because I was thinking it can help us to understand more easily. So he wrote, in modern science, what we are studying about life is actually the interactions of the internal self and the external energy of the primeval source. We are studying only the interaction. So, and don't forget, he is a scientist in organic chemistry himself, and also a very important spiritualist. So he explained that in modern science, we don't study the self. We don't study the Atma, the soul, no. Study the interaction of the external self, means we study our body, our mind, and the external energy of the primeval source, God. We don't study the internal energy. So we study the material aspect. See, we don't study the soul, we study what is above the soul, body and mind, and we study the external energy of God. So it is why in our modern day, we are putting more and more importance on science. And science and spirituality have something in common. They need to be experienced, not only believing. Religion, we need to believe. But without belief, there is no religion. But in science, we need to prove our belief. This way, when there is a theory discovered, we need we can do again the same experiment and get the same result. And in spirituality, real spirituality, we need to realize the knowledge. Not only to have the knowledge, not only to believe in the knowledge. It can be good, but it's not enough. And who can guide us in that spiritual science? So he explains that only a bona fide spiritual master can guide us on our trouble to get the perfect knowledge. And Dr. Singh explains that a perfect spiritual master, a bona fide spiritual master, of course, he has two main qualifications. He must have realized the conclusion of the scripture by deliberation and argument. This means not only to have knowledge is not enough, to believe is not enough. You need to have realization. So how to get realization? We need to study to get the knowledge first. We need to be convinced of the knowledge. Sometimes we need to argue with the knowledge to be fully convinced. We need to apply, and we need to get the realization. This is realized knowledge. Without realization, our knowledge is only external. You can say it's all useless. So a bona fide guru must have realization of the conclusions of the scripture. And this also is coming by two things, by deliberation and argument. Deliberation means thinking. Is it true? Is it not true? Is it fully true? Is it partially true? Discussing with other people, arguing, having doubts, expressing the doubts, like that. This is exactly what Arjuna did with Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. He was expressing his doubt, and when he was fully convinced, he was ready to act according to spiritual choice. So a bona fide guru must have that. It's not optional. And he must be able to convince others of his conclusions. So especially in our modern way, people are not so much religious, more scientific. So he must be able to convince in a scientific way. Otherwise, his impact is very low. So this qualification of the spiritual master, Dr. Singh has seen that in his own spiritual master, Srila S.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And also, he has shown to the people who are near him, like his students, his followers, that himself, he has also this qualification as a bona fide spiritual master. And Dr. Singh concluded that by presenting a conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Roy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from Ramananda Roy, asking, what is the highest standard of education? And Ramananda Roy replied that the highest standard of education is to know the science of Krishna. Education has different standards. So it is why sometimes we pick up one topics. It can be mathematics, physics, chemistry, sociology, art, language, any topics, or in education, but there is a different level, different standard. And the science of Krishna is a higher standard of education because if we know the science of Krishna, we know the origin of everything, and we know the principle of every science. And he put in that small book that two verses coming from Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto. I'm going to read in English. In the revealed scriptures, the ultimate object of knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The purpose of performing sacrifice is to please Him. Yoga is for realizing Him. All fruitive activities are ultimately rewarded by Him only. He is the supreme knowledge, and all severe austerities are performed to know Him. Religion, Dharma, is rendering loving service unto Him. He is the supreme goal of life. So this is a part of the conclusion, and he explains then that the process to realize God is to render unalloyed devotional service unto Him. Called Bhakti Yoga. And the way to do it is Sankirtan Yoga. And there is this famous verse, in one Upanishad, explain in this age of Kali, the only means of deliverance is chanting the holy name of Lord Hari Krishna. There is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. And he concludes his book, at the beginning of his book, in his introduction, he was mentioning that he wrote this book for his scientist friend. And he concludes now by writing, we therefore humbly request everyone, scientists, philosophers, businessmen, politicians, and so on, to please chant the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This will cleanse the accumulated dust from the heart and lead to the understanding of Krishna consciousness, the supreme absolute science, the ultimate goal of life. So this conclusion. And of course, I put some information, in contact. For the person who want to have more information, we have the Bhaktivedanta Institute with a website. We can see all the books written by Dr. T.D. Singh there also. And I put my contact, and with Devarshi Das, my numbers, my YouTube channel in English or in French. And of course, if somebody is interested, to be part of trying to understand more the books of Dr. T.D. Singh, that very important topic of science and spirituality, they can, of course, contact me. So thank you very much for listening to that presentation. And if you have the possibility, please read that book, The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness, written by Dr. T.D. Singh in 1973. Hare Krishna.